party start.
What are you doing?
Yeah, what is this?
What is this?
There's a little hat.
Yes.
Oh. Andrea and Andreas!
Andreas! We have you here!
We had a girl gang. I've never had this in my life. This was very exciting, and they're all better than me at chess. I know a lot about wine, obviously. Drink it every morning. No, sorry, that's whiskey in Ireland. I confused the two things. Baguette?
Burger.
Burger? That's 30 seconds to a minute. Alex might lose her first match.
Literally no one opening that's the
Because
easiest
it's
to
the
memorize,
best one.
and you still
It's actually very
mess up
complicated
here.
at higher levels. Yeah. Coats and accessories.
Yeah. Opa!
Yes! Nerd! I understood that.
So we made it to London barely.
Andrea,
Alright, we're crossing the river and there's Big Ben.
This is supposed to be team chess. Okay. I'm tired.
That was fucking terrible, I'm never doing it again.
He couldn't get a gambit already, palms are sweaty, they're heavy, but on the service he's in check already.
I'm so powerful!
And we are here with Alex's best Norwegian friend. Get in here, Hammer. Get in here, Hammer.
Welcome. I have notes. The
Yay,
legendary
notes.
Oslo Botez Oslo tour.
Yay.
What do you think about this work, Nick? Look at this framing. Okay, the framing is not great, but station to the royal palace.
Okay.
And it has all.
We're here with Anna Kremling, my new Botez sister. Might even bring her to Dubai.
Overhand machining.
Did you hear that?
Okay, this is too much. I'm out of it.
Don't leave me.
Which we're going to be seeing. One of the big pieces.
Good tidings we bring to you and your friends. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Now give us some figgy pudding. Now give us some figgy pudding.
We got with us Alexandra and Andrea Botez.
Let's just say.
Do you think chess people are fun?
Honestly, I really enjoy hanging out with chess players. And
The Botez sisters are like sharks, and there's just eels just flying around. Like,
Andrea comes up with only the most refined, classiest, high-quality questions ever.
How does the knights move?
Wait, how do we just
Another draw! I feel one-sided there. My sister just beat the 2500 of test 24. Yeah!
Love game is over.
I know.
It's not going to be long.
El Manito!
Who's gonna climb it off?
Is it over? Why are you still here? It's not going through. Look, Alex, what else did you want? Where's the radar going through? Bonjour, Alamon. Bienvenue à Paris. Yeah, party start.
What are you doing?
Yeah, what is this?
What is this?
There's a little hat.
Yes.
Oh. Andrea and Andreas!
Andreas! We have you here!
We had a girl gang. I've never had this in my life. This was very exciting, and they're all better than me at chess. I know a lot about wine, obviously. Drink it every morning. No, sorry, that's whiskey in Ireland. I confuse the two things. Spaghetti? But burger? It's 30 seconds to a minute. Alex might lose her first match.
Literally no one opening that's the
Because
easiest
it's
to
the best
memorize,
one.
and you still
It's actually very
mess up
complicated
theory.
at higher levels. Yeah. Coats and accessories. Yeah.
Opa!
Yes! Merde, I understood that.
So we made it to London barely.
Andrea,
All right, we're crossing the river, and there's Big Ben.
This is supposed to be team chess. Okay. I'm tired.
That was fucking terrible. I'm never doing it again.
He couldn't get a gambit already. Palms are sweaty, they're heavy, but on the service he's in check already.
I'm so powerful.
And we are here with Alex's best Norwegian friend. Get in here, Hammer. Get in here, Hammer.
Welcome. I have notes. The
Yay,
legendary
notes.
Oslo Botez Oslo tour.
Yay.
What do you think about this work, Nick? Look at this framing. Okay, the framing is not great, but station to the royal palace.
Okay.
And it has all.
We're here with Anna Kremling, my new Botez sister. Might even bring her to Dubai.
Overhand.
Did you hear that?
Which we're going to be seeing. One of the main pieces.
Good tidings we bring to you and your friends. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Now give us some piggy pudding. Now give us some piggy pudding.
We got with us Alexandra and Andrea Botez.
Let's just say.
Do you think chess people are fun?
Honestly, I really enjoy hanging out with chess players. And
The Botez sisters are like sharks, and there's just eels just flying around. Like,
Andrea comes up with only the most refined, classiest, high-quality questions ever.
How does the knights move?
Wait, help me, because they're another draw! I feel one-sided there. My sister just beat the 2500 of chess 24. Yeah!
I know.
Me too!
I'm gonna climb it off.
Is it over? Why are you still here? It's not going through. Look, Alex, what else did you want? Bonjour, Alamon. Bienvenue à Paris. Party start.
What are you doing?
Yeah, what is this?
What is this?
I am reliably told that we have cameras. Welcome everyone to this third round of the Reykjavik Open, the second round of the day. A bit more energy today. Well, not today, but now for this round. Because thank God it's not 10 a.m. anymore. And good morning to all of you who skipped the first round. Honestly, you did well. You prioritized in good fashion. Unfortunately, the last round was a disappointing one. Alexandra getting outplayed by an international master, and Andrea making a big blunder in her opponent's time trouble. to give up some good chances of a result. We can see here that Andrea arrives at the scene. Alexandra already ready for her game. Alexandra is playing a US player, actually. Jivan Karamseti, 2187. He's actually lost quite a lot of rating in the last couple of months. So he's not on great form. And Alexandra, last time she had the black pieces, she managed to beat a much higher rated opponent than this. So I think it's fair to say Alexandra is hoping to go for the win today. And in the background, we see Alexandra chatting with Andrea's opponent. Andrea today is playing Philip Clare, a 1600 rated player from England. So all English speaking on this row, this round. 2 Canadians and an American and an Englishman. I'm sure that's the beginning of some kind of a joke. Can we flip Alex's board? Okay, I swear to you guys, I flipped her board. I swear I flipped her board when I was setting up. I don't know how that happened. But your wish is my command. Okay, that's not entirely true. But on this occasion. I have a question because Andrea and her opponent discussed the match after Andrea resigned. Well, in general, you shouldn't be talking too much at the venue. But when you're kind of in the middle of everything in your head, it feels good kind of letting loose some of the thoughts you had during. So it's quite common for players to kind of forget their manners or kind of just be so into the tension of their game that they forget that you have to wait to discuss it for going outside of the venue, not to disturb the other people. Anna got kicked out yesterday after too much post-game talk. That sounds about right. No, you shouldn't be doing it. But in general, people will excuse you for 15 seconds. And then if you go beyond 15 seconds, someone will give you a brutal stare and a couple of shh. That's the universal shut the fuck up. How early before the game starts do you sit at the board? I'm not in the Carlson school of sitting at the board before the game, in that I never show up before the game is supposed to start. But I don't maximize my time at the board. So it's definitely a thing that you build up some nervous energy if you're sitting at the board for too long before you get to see the first move and how the game progresses. So preferably you want to do like perfect timing 3 minutes before the game so that you have just enough time to start writing down your score sheet and adjusting your pieces, but you're still there for the bell or the whistle or however they choose to start the round. The problem is that most of the time the rounds are delayed. Like now, for instance, the round still hasn't started and it's 5:03. So arriving very close to the game start is usually the good idea. Are the streamers setting up the cameras on their own? Yes. So you can see that Andrea's camera is still not up. And that's because she is not working that fast. But also she was slightly late to the round. So she's still trying to get the technical stuff up and running. Are you allowed to wear a watch? I don't know what the rules are in Iceland. But there are some FIDE World Chess Federation events where wearing a watch, even analog, is no longer allowed. Do chess players use doping? Not to my knowledge. I've never met anyone who's publicly kind of, well, even privately said that they use doping. But also the World Chess Federation wants to be part of the Olympiad, and in order to be able to try and become part of the Olympiad, you have to be part of the WADA, the World Anti-Doping Association. So I have taken a couple of doping tests during like big FIDE competitions. But we only have doping tests in competition. We don't have like you have to report your location like some of the blood doping sports have. Andrea going for another London? I mean, I assume so. Can you imagine a world in which Andrea is not going to play the Jabava London? We all know what's going to happen. And there's no use for me to express my dismay anymore. It's inevitable. Alexandra getting strong opponents today? Well, I mean, this is by far her weakest opponent in this tournament. This is her first opponent below 2300 rating. So, I don't know. She might go for the win, I'm thinking. Okay, this guy plays, let's count the number of squares. That's a light square. I'm pretty sure he went pawn to e4. That is Jivan's usual opening. Alexandra goes pawn to e6. And in other news, Andrea Botez has played pawn to d4. And after knight f6, she's going to play knight c3. What a shocker. Oh, Andrea thinking for her second move. I wonder what she's going to... Oh, she played knight c3. What a surprise. Oh, yeah, no, she really took her time on that second move. Spending 20 seconds really pondering her options before going for knight c3. Wow, and her opponent allows her to play pawn to e4. I do not like this. I'm not a fan of this way of playing for the black pieces, but Andrea did play against this perch twice in Prague, and she didn't do particularly well with it. However, given that this is a double round, I think it will benefit her that she has done her preparation on this very recently. So pawn to e4 from Andrea. She has a good grip of the center already. Let's check in with Alexandra. Her opponent has played pawn to d3. Well, I've actually checked some of his games, and I've seen that he does this occasionally. I didn't warn Alexandra because I thought, well, if he does that, she's just going to have to play a game, and that's fine. No need to overthink it. And she's not overthinking it. She's playing pawn to d5, knight to d2. The idea here is that after pawn takes pawn, then the pawn can take back without the queen trade being possible. So that's the point with this knight d2 move. Alexandra plays knight f6. Her opponent plays knight f3. And now both c5 and bishop to e7 are good moves. Going back to Andrea, her opponent plays pawn to d6. And I'm trying to remember what Andrea did. Like last time she played h4, no? She played h4 like super early. And then the other game, she went bishop f4. So she's playing bishop e3. I think this is what she did in Prague as well. And then after bishop g7, she played h4. I'm pretty sure this is what happened. Because I remember vaguely what happened in that she made this... Well, she made me quite unhappy in the way she pushed her pawns. She pushed both her pawns, didn't she? And she left this gaping hole on the g4 square, allowing the knight to jump in, and now there's no white pawns to kick the knight out. So this was her game in Prague, and I'm kind of hoping she will be a bit more careful about giving the opponent access to a square where she has no pawns that can push them away. Bishop g7 is on the board. And now the question is, will she repeat her h4 move? To be fair, in that game, she did end up winning. So h4 did give her a win in Prague. But on the other hand, maybe she studied the aggression and decided that it was too much aggression. I'm not sure I can even convince myself to finish that sentence. Andrea thinking something is too much aggression. I mean, if Andrea doesn't go h4, I'm going to try to get Benseiya on here. And we're going to try to get him to reveal how on earth he managed to rein in Andrea from playing the hyper aggressive moves. That would be sensational. I mean, who are we kidding? Of course she's gonna go h4. Okay, Alexandra's opponent plays c3, and Alexandra goes c5, and now he goes g3. Computer already liking Alexandra's position, but this system for white is actually called the King's Indian attack. So basically, white is setting up as if he was playing with the black pieces in a King's Indian. And Alexandra knows the King's Indian. She plays it herself. And I've been studying these lines recently because I thought maybe I would play against Bassem Amin recently. And he is the biggest expert in this for the white pieces. So I was studying some of the lines and the way Bassem Amin played it. And interestingly, Bassem never plays pawn to c3. He always likes to have his pawn remain at this c2 square. He just never touches these pawns and allows black to just, go crazy trying to advance their pawns on the queen side. So maybe this pawn to c6 is already an inaccuracy. If we trust Bassem Amin's... he is actually the best African player and recently won 4 times gold medal at the African Games. That was actually last weekend, so that was very recent. But Bassem Amin never plays pawn to c3, so maybe this will be an issue for Jevan. Jevan? Oh God, I'm gonna butcher this name, aren't I? In the future. No clocks on the board. The clocks are 15 minutes delayed. So they're not gonna pop up until the games have lasted 15 minutes. GV? Really? That sounds... G1? G-Man? I don't know, chat. You're not inspiring me with confidence that you know what you're talking about. Wow! Andrea didn't go h4. I am shocked. but she did castle to the opposite side compared to her opponent. Queen to d2 played, black castles and white castles. Exciting game, but who was in doubt? Andrea decides to go with her king to the left side. Black puts the king on the right side. And in this case, the right side might be the wrong side, in that this pawn, this rook, will try to get involved in the game. And Andrea is definitely going to launch a big attack here, trying to use her pawns to eliminate some of the pawns defending the black king. And also, basically, Andrea's mission right now is going to be getting rid of this pawn. If she could just take this pawn off the board, she would be happy to do that, because this pawn is blocking the rook's ability to point up against the black king. So she basically just wants to get rid of this pawn to have an attack pointing down on the king. But that's easier said than done. But a good start to the game. And I would say a start that really suits Andrea's level of aggression. Knight to d7 played. Computer engine is very keen on this bishop h6 move. Why are we not liking pawn to h4? Yeah, no, pawn to h4 is fine. It's good even. I don't know why the computer was so obsessed with this bishop move. Pawn to h4 is good at this point. And yeah, I think Andrea's opponent is going to have a tough time here. Let's check in with Alexandra. So her opponent played bishop g2. So Alexandra has gone knight c6, bishop c2, g2, queen c7. Actually, doing some investigations on this line, I'm not super convinced that queen c7 is needed. At least not this early. But it's a very classic move to play because you're trying to gain control of the e5 square. Castles from white, and then castles from black. It is what I assume is going to happen. And then rook to e1. White is trying to go pawn to e5. Interestingly, the computer recommends pawn takes e4. And then if pawn takes back, then e5. Somehow the computer thinks this is better for black, but I don't know about that, because here you create this square on d5 where there are no black pawns that can challenge a white piece should they successfully land on the d5 square. And that's the kind of long-term weakening of your position I would be a little bit skeptical of. But on the other hand, if you get good development, like get your bishop out, get this rook into the center, I mean, black is fine in these lines in multiple ways. So it's just a matter of taste, how Alexandra wants to proceed. Would like to see her castle, though. Castling on move 8, it's not such a bad thing. Oh, wow, she plays b5 instead. Alexandra is legitimately allergic to castling. I don't get it. I'm not sure what happened to her as a kid that made her decide that she should never castle her king. Especially when she's pushing so aggressively with the pawns. It's like, why don't you want to castle and then push the pawns? Like, castles rook e1 and then go b5. But I guess it's just going to be this same kind of thing. It's just the instinct to go with the pawn before getting the king to safety. It just... Oh, it drives me crazy. I just want her to castle. And I got her to castle in the last game, and then that was a massive problem as well. I guess, I mean, she's winning games with black, and she's not castling, so... Apparently, kids, the role models are showcasing how you can play chess without castling your king. The king is an attacking piece? I don't know about that. The thing is, when you go b5, you're basically announcing that you're not going to go castling to the queen side, right? You're basically saying, oh, I'm going to be super aggressive with my pawns over here. So I'm definitely not going to move my king in that direction. And it's like, well, if you're going to announce that you're not going to move your king over there, you might as well castle first. But Engine says it doesn't matter and that she can castle next move. I guess. My concern is something like this. Takes, opens up the e-file. It's not super scary right now, but it could be a thing. And then c4 challenges in towards the center. And if you trade and try to avoid this pressure in towards the d5 square and go d4, now knight to e5 tries to open here on this diagonal. And then when you try to protect, then queen a4. And suddenly it becomes a problem that you didn't get your king to safety. Because suddenly this rook is pointing down on the king, the queen is pointing down, there's the bishop with the crossfire here. And it becomes a big problem that you didn't castle. So I don't see the point in allowing stuff like this when the alternative was to castle and then go b5. Oh, she castled? Big success. Wow. She did it by move 10. Almost a personal record for her. Rook to e1 was played pointing down towards the king, and now the king thought, well, let's get out of here. And now we've gone back to, this is what I wanted her to play, right? I wanted her to go castles, rook e1, and then b5. So we're basically at the same thing. She got to the same position, but chose to delay castling for as long as possible. Maybe she has some kind of a long-term bet with someone. I don't know. I find her extreme desire to delay castling as long as possible to be very, very suspicious. How does Andrea's opponent play? Well, he just finally put a pawn in the center of the board. But Andrea's gonna make the trade here on the king side. And then computer wants pawn to f4, which is not really an idea I've seen in this opening, but it does make sense trying to just get as many pawns pointing in towards the center as possible. And it does feel like this kind of position should suit Andrea very well, in that her natural instinct is always going forward. And here going forward seems quite sensible for the player with the white pieces. Can you upload your legendary Oslo Botez Tour PDF somewhere? I will have you know that it's not a PDF, it's a Word file. And it's not for public consumption. It was just my notes. No full sentences. And you need to be a hammer to understand the notes. Okay, what has happened? Nothing on Alexandra's board. Her opponent is thinking. And Andrea is thinking for once. Well, I've actually caught up with all the moves. Word file, sus. I mean, who makes their, I mean, how do you even make a PDF, right? PDF is just a viewing format, a print format. You can't really make a PDF, right? Alexandra traded? Oh, well, her opponent traded. But yeah. Okay, pawn takes d5, pawn takes d5. So we're not going to get the classic attack with the pawn advancing in the center and allowing black to freely try to advance the pawns on the queen side. Here instead, we're going to have white trying to aim the bishop in particular in towards this d5 square. And this, I feel like, is part of the reason why I'm not sure queen to c7 is necessary this early. Because I studied some of these lines and I kind of realized that stuff like this, like, you're not going to be able to prevent pawn to e5 in the long run regardless. So the only thing you kind of should be attentive to in terms of the order in which you execute your plan is going to be against this pawn takes pawn thing. But in here, in this position, without the insertion of the moves rook e1 and queen c7, we can see that black benefits from leaving the queen on the initial square because the queen now helps to protect the only real major weakness in black's position, the pawn on d5. And this, I think, is part of the reason why I think queen c7, like Alexandra did, it's incredibly common. Like, it's not like a mistake in any way. It's one of the most common ways of playing this position with black, but I'm not sure it's necessary. I think you could just castle and go b5. And yeah, by playing queen c7, you're temporarily preventing pawn to e5, but you can never prevent it long term anyway. So you might as well just not prevent it and be better placed in case white chooses the other plan to trade in the center. So interesting nuances there. And maybe I'll try to tell Alexandra my feelings on the subject. So b5 was played. And then rook e1 castles. Takes. And has he moved? No, he's still thinking. So Alexandra's position is very much fine. She has very far advanced pawns. So that's basically what her opponent is going to try to exploit. White is going to try and say that you've been too aggressive with your pawns, and this can be punished with this bishop maybe pointing in against this pawn, and then something like this bishop could gain time attacking the queen, or maybe like a rook could come and point down on the queen to kind of emphasize that this queen is really not super well placed on the c7 square. And sometimes you can go with the knight and try and maneuver the knight around and have the knight attack this d5 square. Also, the bishop can try and go to g5. So here, actually, the computer is recommending knight to f1, which makes a lot of sense because you're then threatening bishop to g5, the bishop tries to eliminate one of the defenders of the d5 square, and then you can also then come with your knight up to e3 to try and attack that pawn afterwards. So in this position, I would probably play pawn to h6, simply because I want to prevent the white bishop for trading itself off for my knight, because even though this is a knight, this knight has a really important task of keeping the d5 pawn defended. So something like this I would expect coming up. Andrea, she has traded the bishops. I remember a game in Prague. She had a similar situation. She was offering the trade of bishops, and her opponent ended up playing rook e8 and then bishop ah8, and ended up avoiding this trade altogether. And that was quite unfavorable for Andrea. So I feel like she's kind of remembering that situation from Prague and deciding that's not going to happen to me this time. So she makes the trade early. Black obviously recaptures. And now pawn to f4 is a very good move for white, putting pressure in towards the black center and the pawn on e5. So, and it also fits with Andrea's general aggressive style. But one thing I will say about this pawn to f4 move is that once you make this move, you can no longer go here. So if Andrea wants to attack with her pawn along the flank, then she should definitely choose to move her f-pawn one step forward. And that's because the pawn will then both protect her other pawn in the center, but also keep control of this g4 square. And then if her opponent does something trying to build up on the opposite flank, then she can push forward with the h-pawn. But you don't want to combine both f4 and h4, because then you leave this square on g4 very open, and that could enable black to create some kind of blockading scheme. Something like moving the knight here and then moving the pawn here, the other knight here, and just it would be very difficult for white to dislodge this knight and cause some issues there. Is Alex king? I think you mean Andreas king, Felix. Is the king not supposed to be on c3? So in normal, when you castle to the right side, your king is adjacent to the side file, right? But when you castle to the queen side, to the left here, that means that you don't get your king as close to the corner, because the castling move is moving the king 2 steps in the direction you want to go and then move the rook over. So when you castle to the queen side, you actually don't get the king as far out on the side of the board, which is actually very interesting, because it means in queenside castling, one of the most common moves to follow up with pretty soon thereafter is going king b1 and actually taking some extra time getting that king out towards the corner of the board. But you also gain an advantage from this, because the rook actually traveled an extra square compared to what the rook would on the opposite flank, which means the rook immediately goes into one of the 2 central files on the board. And oftentimes castling queenside can be extra advantageous for this rook because it immediately gets involved down one of the most important files on the board. Why is the Jabava always winning? I mean, it's not always winning though, is it? Andrea has won a lot of games with it, but she's also been in trouble in a lot of those games. For once, she's actually looking to... It looks like she's going to get an advantage out of her opening, though. But I refuse the premise that the Jabava is always winning. I don't want to live in a world where that's true. Okay, Alexandra's opponent, I wasn't even on the current position, but he did play knight to f1. So now Alexandra needs to be concerned about this bishop coming out to try and trade with the knight. The bishop could also come in to attack the queen. There's some unpleasantness to watch out for here for Alexandra. So my suggestion was pawn to h6, which prevents the bishop from going here, but it also prevents the knight from going there. Because the alternative the computer is recommending for black would be to go bishop to e6 and have this bishop help protect in towards the center of the board, and in particular black's pawn on d5. However, then I would be like a little bit nervous about knight to g5, because the knight really can dislodge this bishop very easily from that square. As it turns out, maybe I'm overestimating this for white, because here you can just move the bishop, attack the queen, and when the queen moves, then you can attack the knight, force the knight back, and you can go back to the e6 square if you so choose. So probably knight to g5 is just nothing to be afraid of. So bishop to e6, good move. Pawn to h6, good move. Can we figure out any other natural move? Like rook to e8 feels fairly sensible. But then bishop f4 attacks the queen, and if we try to block with our bishop offering the trade, then there could be some issues with white rook trading with the black rook, which lures the knight away from its defensive positioning, and then the white knight could come forward and try and attack in the center. So I'm really hoping for... Well, bishop to e6 is probably the best for Alexandra. And then h6 is a good second. Maybe pawn to a5, a third choice. But right now, things are happening in the center of the board. So I think Alexandra needs to abandon her advancing the pawns on the queenside plan. And instead focus on, well, basically just trying to keep everything protected in the center. Andrea trades. That is not super typical of her. I'm assuming her opponent will take back with the pawn, because you want to have a pawn taking control in the center of the board. Interestingly, the computer really dislikes this for white, but it also really liked this for white if you didn't trade the bishops first. So here, computer says big advantage white, whereas after you've made the trade of bishops and then make the trade in the center, here computer says equal. And the big difference between those two positions is that after pawn to h4, if Andrea goes for this plan, now black has an extra option to defend with pawn to h5 and blockading the white pawn from progressing the way it wants to. And that's why sometimes you want to delay the trade between these two bishops, because here after the trade and then h4, there's no pawn to h5 because the white bishop Normally, when you go with your bishop out here, you're just thinking, oh, I want to trade with the black bishop so that I eliminate one of the most important defenders in front of the black king. But actually, it turns out this move is also blockading the black pawn from blockading the white pawn, right? The bishop is making sure that the black pawn cannot blockade the white advance, which secures white's ability to continue forward on the next move. So probably, given how Andrea continued, making the trade of the bishops was inaccurate, as now after the trade she wanted in the center, she's no longer able to easily make that advance of the pawn up the h-file. But it doesn't really matter because Andrea's opponent took with a knight, which just, it makes absolutely no sense to me. Why would you voluntarily choose not to give yourself a pawn controlling the middle of the board? And now Andrea is also going to win some time because she can push her pawn forward and attack the black knight at the same time. Knight back, and then... yeah, I'm not sure how Andrea should continue forward, though. I guess knight to f3, but then black is going to get some counterplay, pointing his rook together with the knight against the e4 pawn. But the computer really likes white's position. And it's not too surprising because when you have two pawns standing next to each other like this, you control both the light squares and the dark squares in the center of the board. And black is not super aggressive with really any of their pieces. You can play like this and just try and centralize everything. Centralizing doesn't really seem like Andrea's style. She is more of a bang bang everyone up into the attack kind of player. But let's see how she approaches this position. The good news is that she's not going to create that horrendous weakening of the g4 square, it seems. Because now she's going to be able to play pawn h4. And now the benefit of Andrea not having been super aggressive with her h-pawn is that if the knight tries to come to the g4 square, it's so easy for us to kick the knight away. Whereas in a similar game Andrea had previously, she went h4 first and then f4. And this I really didn't like, as it allowed her opponent to get this outpost for the knight. An outpost is a square you're controlling with your pawn, and then there's none of the opponent's pawns that can be positioned to attack your knight out, or knight or bishop or whatever. But in general, outposts are often occupied by the knights. Love me some fish and chips. Love getting checkmated by kids. Are you saying Andrea's a kid? Is that the implication? Do you think Andrea's opponents, when playing her, consider her a kid? Like, oh no, I'm so scared playing against her because she's a kid? I feel like in chess, you lose your kid status already at like 16. Everyone under 25 equals a child. I mean, I don't disagree from like a worldly perspective, but in the chess world in particular, there is a certain extra fair playing against the youngest of the young. There's this one girl playing in in this tournament. She's also from England. She's 8 years old, and she's almost rated 2100. And she was playing like the European Women's Championship for Blitz and Rapid or something, and she was playing on par with international masters. So that's where we put the bar for scary kids, the 8-year-olds, your 10-year-olds. 12-year-olds. But a 22-year-old? Let me double check how old Andrea is. They've stopped being scary for a very long time. Andrea is 21, 22, thereabouts. Age 6. Ooh, Alexandra played one of my moves. Last time she did that, it was a big mistake. But I'm hoping this time it's gonna be okay. I kind of like the multi-purpose part of this. It prevents the bishop from coming up to g5, which I thought could be a bit annoying. And it also prevents knight to g5, which turns out it wasn't that annoying, but it's still a nice thing to prevent. What's the oldest player who became a grandmaster at chess? Well, the thing is, Mercurion, that if you win the World Senior Championship, which is like 65 plus, you're granted the Grandmaster title automatically. And quite a few people have become a Grandmaster in that way. So I think a better question is, who is the oldest player who has gotten the Grandmaster title through the norms and the kind of regular system? I think that's a more kind of skill based. Not that not becoming world champion is terrible. It's just that the World Senior Championship is just not as competitive as it maybe could be or should be. But one of the oldest people to get the Grandmaster title through norms is actually someone who played in my club. He had 2 Grandmaster norms and the rating from way back when he was younger. And then he got his 3rd and final Grandmaster norm kind of just by accident in the Norwegian Chess League. And his name is Leif Øgård. And he became a Grandmaster in 2007 when he was... Oh, he wasn't even that old. He was 55 years old. Man... Oh my! To be fair, in 2007 I was like 17 years old. I considered 55 like ancient, and I've realized that you can't. That I'm uncomfortably close to 55 at this point. That I don't consider that such an old age anymore. But at that time, I thought like, oh, he's super old and he got his Grandmaster title. Oh, that's kind of nice. You were 17 in 2007? It was better days. Larry Kaufman got his Grandmaster title at 60. Yeah, okay, so Larry Kaufman beats my guy by quite a lot of years. Some people, I've read some discussions, I've seen this question being asked online in the past, and I've seen some people mention Ben Feingold as one of the oldest players to get the Grandmaster title. But I don't think Ben is that old. Ben Feingold got his Grandmaster title in 2009 when he was 40. Like, how is that old? Are we really mentioning 40-year-olds as sensationally old in terms of getting their Grandmaster title? That's not right. It's late for a Grandmaster? I mean, no, it's not. Normalize getting your Grandmaster title in your 40s. Damn, the US is electing 80-year-old presidents. And you guys are gonna come here and you can't play the peak of your chess powers at 40? Of course you can. We shouldn't be electing 80-year-old presidents? Well, I mean, those are your words, not mine. I tend to agree, but, you know, I will say this. In Norway, there's like a lobby working against age discrimination. And let me just tell you that they wouldn't have a job in the US. In Norway, it's a problem that no one really wants to hire you when you're like 55. But in the US, apparently you can get the best jobs at 80, which is absolutely wild. Ageism happens in every company except the US government. I'll take your word for it, Burke. You need quick reactions for chess? Yes, chess famous for needing the ability with a hand-eye coordination. A game literally played by blind people. Yeah, very important with the key reflexes. Alexandra's opponent moved. Okay. Pawn to d4 on the board. So he's trying to give Alexandra another isolated queen's pawn. Uh-oh, this is very bad news. Alexandra with the bad feeling of the isolated pawn from the earlier game today. And now her opponent is trying to give her another one. Because if she captures this white pawn in the center, after these trades, black is left with a pawn in the center that cannot be protected by the other pawns. That is concerning. And computer also agrees that black would be in some trouble here, giving white the advantage. So that means Alexandra is very likely to play this move c4, which avoids the trade between these two pawns, and which then also avoids this pawn being kind of exposed to the attack from white's d file. And I mean, to me, this looks like a decent move to me. Computer is not super happy, but I'm not really sure the computer knows what it's doing. Like, why would this be a disaster? Okay, apparently the computer likes this kind of play for white, And then you just go knight e3 afterwards, and you start pushing your pawns up against the black king. I kind of agree that it looks unpleasant. Yeah, no, I kind of agree. That's a bit unpleasant. Top move on the computer is queen to b6. No, bishop to e6. And then takes, go for the bishop trade. But yeah, I understand. I would definitely understand why Alexandra would not be a fan of this continuation. Like here, she would get that isolated queen's pawn in the middle, and she doesn't really have any good justification for why she has allowed her opponent to get that pressure. Computer is saying about equal, but it very much feels like black is the one facing some unpleasantness. But at the same time, I don't feel like what Alexandra played this opening basically the way everyone plays it. I'm amazed if this playing queen to c7 early has made this big of an impact in the game that she's already in trouble, having played pretty much every sensible move. Like, nothing Alexandra has done has been outrageous in any way. And yet somehow, oh God, I lost the position. Like she hasn't played super weird or anything, and yet her position is definitely a little unpleasant right now. It's incredible. Typical French, I guess, that you end up being worse for no clear reason. That hasn't really been Alexandra's experience with the French in the past, though. How about c4? Is it good? I mean, I assume that's what she's gonna end up doing. Because she remembers the morning round and she's like, I don't want to deal with an isolated pawn. So then you go c4, but computer did make a reasonable argument for why this is just a bit sad. The white pawns are working very well, protecting each other in towards the center. And then you have the knight, which is kind of the star of the show. Very well located in the middle and incredibly difficult to chase away. Yeah, I'm not super happy about this. But at the same time, I don't feel like she did anything wrong. But I guess she did. It's very annoying when your opponent's advantage come creeping up on you and you don't really understand what's going on until you're already in trouble. I would have pinned the knight to the queen myself. Honestly, that feels like a good shout. The one problem with putting the bishop here is that it might provoke the knight coming in to both attack the bishop and put pressure in towards the middle of the board. So there's an issue here with this bishop being too easy to chase away. And if the bishop tries to remain on the diagonal pointing in towards the queen, then the knight can actually jump further forward. And it turns out this black bishop can't get away from the knight's range. Yeah, no, somehow Alexandra got into kind of serious trouble. And I don't fully understand how it happened. In the meantime, in Andrea's game, Andrea has played knight to f3. A sensible developing move, getting the pieces in towards the middle. Life is good for her. If bishop to g4, trying to give white doubled pawns, then she can easily go with her bishop to just keep everything protected. And if the rook tries to attack in the center, Andrea can go h3, attack the bishop, and if there's a trade, she'll be able to keep her center protected thereafter. Andrea had a really good first round game yesterday, where she just completely destroyed her 1600 rated opponent. And I made the argument then that one of the key ways of improving your rating is just having consistency in always beating lower rated players. And right now, I feel like Andrea has gotten a good position. She's been good with the white pieces all throughout the Prague tournament, and it kind of looks like she's going to continue in the same vein here. This position, there's an equal amount of pawns, but look at the eval bar. Computer is saying white has an advantage of 3 pawns, despite the pawns right now being completely equal, which really just illustrates the benefit of white's control in the center of the board. We got all of this covered. We also got the queen and the rook. Like, everything is under control. And you have the long-term plan of just chasing these guys up the board against the black king. So I'm not sure what black is going to do. This bishop needs to get into the game. The g4 square seems like the only place this bishop could get involved. So I thought the line I put on the board was reasonable, but it doesn't seem great. It doesn't seem great for black. And in fact, bishop d7 is played instead. Oh, but that's just asking for it. Pawn to e5 now. Pawn to e5, and if this pawn is captured, Andrea will recapture. There's an attack on the knight, and if the knight moves, then queen takes bishop is a free piece. Yeah, no, this is just playing into Andrea's hands. Pawn to e5 just became even more powerful, considering this bishop's placement. And I don't think there's anything in the world that can tempt Andrea away from just advancing her pawns forward into the opponent's half. So pawn to e5 almost certainly going to happen, in my opinion. In the meantime, in Alexandra's game, she has played the chat suggestion of bishop to g4. Which, you know, if chat was good at chess, they would be in Reykjavik. So we're a bit critical, like we're bigger fans of her going with the hammer suggestions than the chat suggestions. But, you know what they say, even a broken clock, something twice. So bishop g4 on the board, and it does make logical sense, because right now, if she's conceding that the pawns will be traded and she will be left with an isolated pawn in the center, they often say that it's important to control the square in front of the isolated pawn, which is this square d4. And she has her knight and she has her bishop trying to take control here, but The only way the other bishop can participate is actually through what it's doing right now, in that the bishop is putting pressure on the knight. The knight cannot move because of the queen behind it. And this knight is one of the key defenders of the d4 square. So very often when you see like a situation where there's one super important square and it's a dark square, and you have a light squared bishop, and the light squared bishop obviously never can attack a dark square, that's technically true, but there's the interesting circumstance of how a light squared bishop can influence dark squares by capturing a knight that's on the light square. Because do you know what's true for a knight on the light squares in 100% of circumstances? That is a question to you, chat. You may answer. He controls a dark square. Well done, Dodge. Kudos to you. A knight on the light square always controls a dark square. So because of the way the knight moves, it always controls the color specter opposite to where it itself is placed. So a light squared bishop can always influence the dark squares by trying to eliminate an opposing knight, because then you eliminate a knight who was trying to control the dark squares. How does the knight move? You're gonna have to talk to Andrea about that. Okay, actually, I'm ashamed to say this, but this bishop to g4 move is growing on me. Because one of the other things is that I was concerned about this knight to e3 move, that it would be too easy to just both attack the bishop and attack the pawn in the center. But it actually turns out that here, if you just move the bishop back, you've kind of accomplished something in that you provoked white into putting the knight in front of the bishop, and you're blockading the bishop's ability to participate in the game. So yeah, you got your knight to a good square, but you also ruined your bishop. One thing you could try is bishop to f4, and then after the queen moves, then you can go knight to e3 and say that, well, now the knight is not in the path of the bishop because the bishop got out first. But even in these circumstances, like, now this bishop is struggling to control the d4 square, and Alexandra has her queen, her bishop, and her knight trying to take control here. So she has really good control of the square in front of the isolated pawn, which means that there's a fair chance Alexandra will be able to push that pawn forward in the future. And if the knight moves back to try and control this square, well then, yeah, stuff is happening here. So I'm kind of liking this. Oh God. Okay, so knight e3 was played, and then instead of moving the bishop back, saying that it's a success that we've managed to get the knight blockading the bishop, Alexandra has captured on f3, after which the computer says it's game over. That's not great. Okay, so apparently it's very important that white take back with the queen. The idea being that after pawn takes d4, Knight takes d5, takes. Oh yeah. Damn it. The knight is under attack, this is under attack, and the bishop is behind supporting. And why is this just over? Ah, because if the knight moves, you can do basically anything. And you're up a pawn and the bishop pair. And what if we protect here? Ah, then knight f5, and suddenly this is super scary. Bishop goes back. Yeah, and the knight takes h6. And the queen comes in. I'm kind of stunned. I'm not gonna lie. I don't even feel like Alexandra made any like super obvious mistakes. I mean, other than giving up her bishop pair. And now it's just over? Queen takes, computer gives insanely massive advantage for white. There's the threat to the d5 pawn, and there's the threat of knight f5. In particular, knight f5 looks very scary to me. But knight takes d5 is also kind of free if the opportunity presents itself. Andrea played e5. Well, of course she did. In what universe would she not push a pawn forward if the opportunity presented itself? And here it's actually good. Normally Andrea can be and Alexandra's opponent takes back with the queen. Oh, this is very bad. Oh well. Are the twins well known in the chess community? Just to be clear, do you mean the Botez twins? Can she force a queen trade? No, I don't think so. Hey, guys, I mean, they've made videos of people thinking Andrea is older than Alexandra. If there's a new viewer thinking that they're twins, I mean, we shouldn't laugh. We should try and correct their misconception. No, Alexandra and Andrea are not twins. And yes, they are famous in the chess community. We should encourage the rumors. Honestly, we should. Because, I mean, in 2 years, they're going to be the same age. So we might as well get a head start on the rumors we're going to have to fabricate in a couple of years anyway. Not just famous, they're superstars? Wow. What's the threshold for that? Andrea wore a hat so the photographer won't take a picture of her hair? I mean, wearing a hat is a fashion statement, no? Obviously, the photographer is going to take more pictures when you're wearing such a staple piece. How is Alexandra so far behind already? It's kind of a mystery. The computer started giving white some advantage, and I was confused why things had gone so bad so quickly. Now it's not so much of a mystery anymore, because Alexandra gave away her bishop pair voluntarily. And you're not supposed to be doing that. And by making this trade, she allowed white to get very easy access towards the d5 pawn. And the problem is that even if you keep that pawn defended, the knight comes forward to this incredible attacking square f5. And then it's problems everywhere. Pawn takes in the center, bishop takes h6. Suddenly, all the tactics are just working for white. Don't you hate it when that happens? If you take the bishop, then the knight captures the black bishop. And the black bishop was now the only thing defending the knight, since we moved this guy to capture the white bishop. And then at the end of all of these tactics, the queen is attacking in like 3 different directions. And you just can't hold everything together. No, the white knight gaining access to these 2 squares was just so problematic. So she had to go back to e6. But then she was fine. So I guess it's only about a misjudged trade of bishops and then realizing too late that the control of your light squares in the center and on the king side is just... That was quite important. It was more important than what was obvious. Oh my. And I'm checking the computer lines now. Computer's even saying this sacrifice, and then you can just not try and get back the bishop, but just recapture. And apparently this is super, super bad. Queen f5? What is that? Is white even threatening anything? Queen f5, queen g5. Once again, is white even threatening anything? Oh, and then you go knight f5. Like, white has all the time in the world to create their attack against the black king, because we can't, in this position, we can't move the knight because then the queen comes down for the checkmate. We can't move the bishop because then the queen takes the knight. And we're just completely stuck with all our pieces. And white can afford just being super slow in getting the queen closer for the final kill. What do you think her plan was by taking the knight? Well, obviously she wanted to reduce white's control of the d4 square. So after takes back, clearly she was thinking that queen takes wasn't going to be an option, because then you leave the pawn undefended in the center. And if white recaptures, then she would be right, then black is completely fine. The problem is just that this knight got some really juicy options in moving forward, and that's just a disaster for black with white's really good light square control. Hammer, would you be the highest rated player if you joined this tournament? No, definitely not. Alexandra actually had a training session with Ivanchuk last night. And Ivanchuk was once the number 2 rated player in the world. So there's some big names competing in Iceland this tournament. Knight e8 played? Okay. So the knight keeps the pawn on d6 defended. And now the question becomes, how does Andrea increase her pressure? And it's not actually so easy for her. And I'm not sure I feel like calm moves is necessarily Andrea's strength. Right now, one of the top choices by the engine is pawn to h3, which is a really good move. But it doesn't reek of Andrea Botez, does it? The idea behind this move is simply preventing the bishop from coming up and trading itself with the knight on f3, which is ironic given the situation and how that caused so much trouble for Alexandra on the neighboring board just now. But in Philip's case, getting this trade would actually be a success because this knight participates in defending the pawn on e5. So if black could eliminate the defender, then that would increase his chances of doing something with this pressure against the white pawn. So pawn to h3, the recommended move. But it seems a bit... It doesn't feel like an Andrea move. So I'm thinking pawn to h4. That's more in her style, isn't it? And then if bishop to g4, pawn to h5. This is what I think of when I see Andrea playing chess. And actually, wow, this is interesting. After I input these moves, the computer decided that it liked this plan better than the other plan. So actually, the cutthroatness of Andrea would actually be a good idea here. Sometimes the computer, when you just input some moves, the computer changes its mind and realizes that, no, I actually underestimated these moves you suggest, and now I'm going to give a better evaluation than I did in the previous situation. So now when we go back, yeah, look at this. So computer is saying plus 2.3 for Andrea, which is already a lot. But it's suggesting pawn to h3 as the best move. But when you manually input pawn to h4, it actually, the more it thinks about it, the more it feels like, oh yeah, that's a good move. And that might actually be better than the stuff I was thinking about. But in any case, that's very good news for the Andrea fans, because that means Andrea's style is definitely an option here for winning this position. She captured which one? Oh, Andrea captured. Why are we allowing the black knight to come into a better position? Yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me. That's just a bad move. It made no sense allowing this knight to get off the edge and release the tension. Andrea was so complimentary of me the other week when she said, "Oh, I really listened to what you said about not releasing the tension too soon," and it felt like she was really understanding that you got to live with the pawn tension at times. But here she has released the tension. I would assume she wants to go knight b5 afterwards, because she wants to try and open up for her queen and rook to point down against these numerous black pieces. Okay, and here the computer says black's best move by far is rook to c8, which I can assure you no human is never gonna play. That's crazy. So I'm guessing she'll play knight b5 afterwards, because she doesn't want to have this knight standing here blocking her potential for the queen and rook to attack together. So knight b5 makes perfect sense, and then after the trade, she's gonna have this pressure down on the bishop, and if the bishop moves, she's gonna be able to go with her queen to attack the king, and she'll also be able to ruin the black pawn structure, giving black doubled pawns on the queen side. And this kind of position is gonna be, well, white is much better in this endgame. And while endgames are not traditionally one of Andrea's favorite expertises, it does help when your opponent has a lot of pawn weaknesses. It makes endgames a lot easier to play when you can basically just move your rook over and have lots of pawns to attack, no problem. How are we doing on time management? Andrea is down quite a bit. Oh, and Alexandra doesn't really matter. It's harsh, but it's kind of true. Okay, Alexandra makes the best of the bad situation. So she needed to defend the pawn on d5. And she brings her rook in to take care of it. The problem is just that after knight to f5, now actually the h6 move is, had the pawn been on h7, maybe you could potentially survive this. But because the pawn is on h6, there's so many variations in which a bishop or a knight can sacrifice itself. It's not even really a sacrifice, because you're always going to win back with the queen's pressure against the knight. Maybe you need to go like knight e4 here. Is that okay? Oh god, that's not okay. There's still a sacrifice. Oh god. Oh no. We can win. The good news is that we can win 2 pieces. The bad news is that even so, the king is just stuck and there's rooks and pieces coming in. Yeah, so apparently this is winning for white. And I'm not having a tough time believing it. The black king is somewhat separated from the rest of black's army. If your king doesn't have a single piece in a 2x2 nearby, probably you're going to lose the game. Especially when you don't have any pieces in that area, but your opponent has their queen. That's bad news. So the issue was castling. Oh my god. She did end up putting her king in a dangerous situation, yeah. But I would make the argument that the king would also be in a dangerous situation had she not castled. Like, when your opponent has a rook pointing down here, you're probably not going to be happy having your king in the same on the same file. I'm honestly, this game is inspiring me to play the King's Indian attack myself. If it works for Bassam Amin, and if it works for Yivan Karamseti, then why couldn't it work for me? And this dismantling has been... It kind of happened out of nowhere. Which is a style I appreciate. And one thing I will say is that Alexandra's life would have been so much easier if she hadn't moved her queen to c7. It's not going to be like the decisive mistake, but I'm starting to think that moving the queen up early might just be an inaccuracy. Because it's just not necessary for this opening. But, I mean, even here after d4, it was already unpleasant. And especially coming from the previous game where she had the isolated pawn, you have some negative emotions about it, and you're like, oh, I don't really want to go through that again. And so she tried to... Well, she couldn't really avoid the isolated pawn, but she was saying, if I'm going to go into it, I'm going to have the most control of this d4 square as I possibly can. And then somehow you thought you were kind of getting in trouble on the dark squares, and out of nowhere you end up giving up your bishop, and suddenly without that bishop your light squares just collapse. I'm very impressed with the simplicity in White's scheme to just end up in a winning position. I'm gonna spend some time looking at this opening. I actually spent some time on this during the Prague tournament, and I'm gonna spend some more time because these positions are very interesting. Maybe Alexandra can play this as white, because she does play the King's Indian defense. Why shouldn't she be able to play the King's Indian attack? And especially if she's struggling with the white pieces, just give her a pawn structure and a system that she's familiar with. Actually, that's not such a bad idea. Alexandra could play this with the white pieces, and it works against so many different openings. I think it works against the Sicilian, and it works against the French. And it works against the Catalan. It's a very versatile. Hey, chat, you guys know this, right? Dina is like a Kia expert, right? Dina plays a lot of King's Indian attacks. Not sure. I swear I saw her play the King's Indian attack in a game, but I don't know how frequently she does it. Trying to get rid of another student to Dina? I don't just... Dina's there. If Vasily Ivanchuk can spend an hour analyzing the French McCutcheon with Alexandra, surely Dina can take an hour giving Alexandra some pointers in the King's Indian attack, right? Oh God, update the board, please. I just didn't realize stuff had happened. Pawn takes d4, bishop takes h6. Damn, White's attack just plays itself. Oh, this is... Yeah, it's just over. What a game for White. Knight b5 for Andrea. I'm expecting her to play that, yeah. Did she do it? No. I'm not a huge fan of Andrea making this trade, allowing the knight to get back into the game. We thought pushing the h-pawn was very much in Andrea's style, and it was also pretty good. So pawn takes on d6 was definitely a mistake. But now, since this knight is being protected by the pawn, and you want to get rid of the knight so that you can open the scope of your rook and queen, pointing down the d file, knight to b5 just makes perfect sense. Alexandra will never mentally recover from today. Yeah, she'll be fine. She's still winning rating after this. And she said that poker has really helped her deal with the tilt. And next round, she's going to have the white pieces against a lower rated opponent. I mean, if she doesn't win the next round, then I agree that, you know, it's going to be difficult to recover. But if she just wins the next one against a lower rated, she's still having a great tournament, and she's not going to let two unfortunate games ruin anything. She's losing against much better opponents. I think you're underestimating Alexandra a little bit. I think this guy is not much better than her. Like 200 points, that's not super intimidating. You're gonna want to score some points against these guys. It didn't work out today, but 1 in 4, you want to get a win. Instead of recapturing on b5, can Andrea play queen takes d7? No, not really. Because then you get that same issue of this knight being very well placed, blocking the rook's ability to influence down the d file. The whole reason we're planning to go knight to b5 is trying to get rid of this knight. So, if we go knight b5 takes, we're definitely taking back so that the knight cannot return to its blockading square. And then we make the threat against the bishop. So the bishop has to move. So we gain some time also. I really don't like... So Andrea's decision to take on d6, it's a bad move. But sometimes you make bad moves. That's fine. It happens. But taking on d6, your opponent plays the only possible move that you could imagine that black would play, activating their knight to recapture. Andrea then spending over 15 minutes thinking about this is not great. when you make the decision to take here, which did get a question mark from the computer, quite deservedly so, when you make that decision, you need to have your plan ready for the next steps. Making that trade, activating your opponent's knight, you cannot do that on a whim. If you're going to activate the opponent's knight, it's got to be with a clear plan in mind moving forward. So, yeah. Andrea she kind of lost the thread here. She still has a big advantage, I think, after knight b5. I'm really liking her position. But it feels unnecessary to allow this knight getting back into the game. Better bad plan than no plan? That's not what I'm saying. I think. Is that what I'm saying? Oh man, I'm ashamed of myself in that case. Now, a bad plan is not better than a... But it's like, it's not really about planning. It's like your opponent... When your opponent only has one obvious reply, then you gotta be ready to face that reply. You can't just make a move, allow your opponent to play an obvious move in return, and then start thinking again. Then you should have made your decision earlier on. But knight takes back, good move. And, well, I'm still optimistic about Andrea. Knight to b5, I think she's going to have a good position. But when she made the decision to allow the knight into the game, she should have had her follow-up planned. We're going to move back to Alexandra's game. Bishop to g5, the bishop putting pressure in towards the knight and in towards the rook. If the knight moves, the rook is captured, but if the knight doesn't move, then there will be no more defenders around this king, and the queen will come in, and disaster is bound to happen. So Alexandra she plays the best move, but the best move is a bit sad at this point. She can't allow the bishop to take the knight since the pawn structure in front of the king would be ruined. So she plays knight e4, allowing her opponent to capture her rook. And then we're going to go into this position where, frankly, it's not looking so great. Alexandra lost her h-pawn, and she lost a rook in trade of a bishop, but black here has a knight compared to the rook. So white just has an overwhelming material advantage. Unfortunately. Did Andrea play knight e5? Oh no, someone's suggesting that as an idea. Knight e5 is not silly. Knight e5 looks quite okay. Although maybe it helps black activate this rook pointing down the center. Suddenly, Andrea has to be a bit wary of making too many trades, because the black pieces aren't as cramped and poorly placed as they used to be. And then the beautiful white center with the two pawns standing next to each other, really controlling everything going on in black's half. When Andrea chose to move her pawn forward, she did lose that very nice cooperation she had between the pawns in the middle. And Andrea has spent more than 15 minutes on this move, after her opponent played an absolutely obvious move before that. So at this point, I would rather her use 15 extra minutes here and decide to go for the attack while the Black Knight is very passive, rather than first making the trade between the pawns and then thinking here for 15 minutes and then suddenly realizing, no, actually, I regret my previous move. Now that I thought more about it, I didn't want to activate this Black Knight. But now it's too late. Please ask her about this after the game. Yeah, we can talk about it. It's easier to talk about if she ends up winning in the end, though. It's easier to kind of come in and try and correct mistakes if you overall feel good about your day. What's your elo as a coach? Probably not great. But I did participate in a world championship match as a helper. That's like my one coaching credential that holds some sway. Winning is for corrections, losing is for emotional stability. That is well put, Get Number. And I'm not super good with that. Because I tend to do too many corrections even when the mood doesn't really allow for it. But that's why maybe I'm a better coach to like Magnus, in that he doesn't ever need corrections. So there I can just, I analyzed this opening, I have some interesting ideas. Or do you think any of this is good? The coaching Magnus is way easier than coaching Alexandra and Andrea. I will say that. Absolutely no contest. Not even close. Coaching Magnus, way, way, way easier. Have you coached Andrea? I have tried and failed, yes. I tried getting her to stop play the Jabava London, and I was unsuccessful. Can you explain why? No, it just has to do with that Magnus only needs ideas in the openings, while Alexandra and Andrea needs kind of input on their middle games and stuff like that. And middle game understanding is just super difficult. And explaining it is difficult, and the emotional intelligence you need to have in terms of knowing when to get something said, that when you lose, you need to kind of just help their spirits, and when they win, that's an opportune moment to actually try and make some corrections and point out some details or some misjudgments you've noticed in their game. Emotional intelligence, yeah, it's not my forte. Why stop Jabava? I also stopped it because it's so unsound. I mean, you're literally saying you think the Jabava is bad, and you're asking me why I think Andrea shouldn't play it. Because it's not good. Alexandra moved. Well, for Alexandra to move, it needs... Oh, yeah, no, I forgot to input knight e4 again. Her opponent moved in that he took the rook. Alexandra takes back, and now he's going to take the pawn on d4. Ugh, yeah. there's not a lot of hope. Are the clocks working today? The clocks are working the same way today as they did yesterday. They're on a 15-minute delay. So you can see what the clocks were 15 minutes ago. Andrea played h3. Wow. So h3 was the top choice of the computer, but it was also the top choice of the computer in this position. Remember how we talked about preventing? I said h3 wasn't Andrea's style. I literally said I didn't think h3 was going to happen. This was the computer's top choice here. And if Andrea had spent more time in this position rather than first rushing to make the trade and then thinking for a very long time, maybe she would have realized, oh, pawn to h3 is generally a useful move for white, and there's absolutely no need to release the tension between these pawns, and in particular, allowing the black knight to get into a more active positioning. In fact, black can't even capture the pawn on e5, because then you allow for the white queen and rook to point in towards the bishop. So yeah, this is actually a very serious mistake by Andrea, that she rushed the trade between the pawns and allowed black to significantly improve their positioning as a result. And here, like, if black goes bishop to e6, then maybe they're threatening to capture, and then you can make the trade. But then it's like a similar position to what you could have in the game, only that black has moved this bishop, which may not necessarily be the most useful move given the circumstances. That being said, ironically, after h6, bishop to e6 is actually the top choice from the computer. So, okay, I guess bishop to e6 was going to happen regardless. And then you had to make a decision about the pawns. Bishop e6 is a bit weird, though. Like, surely black should try and go with the rook on the open file. That makes more sense to me. I think the reason the computer wants bishop to e6 is because the computer really wants the queen to f6. So basically getting the queen here will help protect the black king, but you can't do it immediately because this allows the white knight to come in and get a very threatening position and just push the queen back where it came from. And that's why you need to go bishop e6 here, so that you can go queen f6 afterwards without being too concerned about the knight coming in to attack, because here, well, black wins a pawn and some stuff. But interestingly, in this circumstance, pawn to f5 is apparently very good for white. Sacrificing a pawn and then trying to open up in front of the king, and somehow giving up the pawn like this will allow white to have better chances to attack the black king in the long run, which makes a lot of sense to me. I really like this h3 move. I just dislike that she released the tension before, considering that we talked about how it's good to avoid releasing the tension. Alexandra's opponent, in the meantime, has captured the pawn in the center. And Alexandra is down a pawn and a rook for a knight for really no good reason. Why is Andrea getting easier opponents than Alexandra? Good question, Jack and Bones. So the Iceland tournament is using something called accelerated pairings. And what that means is basically the top ranked half of the tournament, they're given invisible points at the beginning so that they play each other more earlier than what they traditionally would. Because in a 400 player event, if you don't accelerate the pairings in the way these guys are doing, then it often ends up with the top players playing too many of the hobby players in the first rounds, and end up not playing against each other towards maybe they play against each other like the 2 final rounds of the tournament. But to find like a proper fair winner, to find a winner who's had to beat other grandmasters, you want to have the grandmaster facing each other from like round 5 minimum. And in order to make this happen, they give invisible points to the best players. And that's kind of why Alexandra is facing more difficult opponents, because Alexandra is part of the group with the invisible points, which means that she faces other people with invisible points who are in general tougher opposition. That was a horrible explanation. Can someone explain it better in chat? Just look up accelerated Swiss. Yeah, I guess you can Google it. But that's the gist of it. The tournament wants to encourage good players playing against each other earlier than what they would if everyone was grouped together in the 400-man group. Yeah, that's a good summation, Supernovae. Okay, I'm starting to like this H3 move. Andrea spent a ridiculous amount of time coming up with it. But it's pretty good. Basically just advancing the pawns. And notice how the pawns are advancing on the light squares. So in the way they're advancing, they're also limiting the options for the black bishop. I really like just preparing g4 next. I wonder what happens if h5? Do we go g4 anyway? Take, take, take. We just open up here. Yeah, this is good, says the computer. Chess isn't that complicated sometimes. When Andrea plays, sometimes you just gotta go bang, bang, bang. Give up some stuff and point everything towards the opposing king. No, h3 is a good move. Well done, Andrea. Tal would have liked Andrea. Yes. Or also the other way around. Has someone ever asked Andrea who her favorite chess player is? Because I feel like Mikhail Tal should be her favorite. The guy just had no limits as far as sacrificing and attacking is concerned. Magnus, yeah. The problem with Magnus is that Magnus personally has said that he doesn't want to have a style. It's like he was asked some stuff about whose style do you think your way of playing resembles, And Magnus said something very, very clever, but also kind of boring. Because he said, I don't want to have a style. Because if you have a style, you have preferences. And I don't believe in preferences. I want to be playing the best move in every situation. And the best move, is preferences don't really play into that. I just want to play good moves, right? I don't want to play like stuff I prefer. I just want to play the best move in every circumstance. And that means that Magnus is an incredible, incredible player. But to some degree, he's not trying to be, super aggressive like Tal or super positional like Karpov. He's just trying to be the best of everything, which in turn means that his idol, the style he's trying to replicate, is basically that of an engine. And having worked with engines in chess quite extensively, I can tell you that those guys are not super charming. They're just, you just sigh and you're like, oh, you can play like this? Ugh. Okay. I guess that's fine. And they have some beautiful, beautiful lines at times. But they don't have like the crazy Mikhail Tal sacrificing everything just because he likes sacrificing. Do you want to be charming or a winner? I mean, I understand why Magnus chooses to be a winner. I don't blame him for that. I'm just saying that as far as Andrea admiring attacking players, Magnus is not it. Because the only times Magnus attacks is when it works. And that doesn't really... that can't be what Andrea idolizes. She needs to find someone who makes the attack work even when it's not supposed to, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Andrea needs to go the Dubov School of Chess. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Daniil Dubov. Playing some crazy attacks, not knowing whether it's going to work or not really even caring whether it's going to work or not, because he just wants to attack the opponent and put pressure and see what happens. Magnus only attacks when he thinks it's the best move, which means when he thinks it's winning. There's limits to how much Andrea can learn from that. Is Magnus still number one in the world? For 15 years straight, yes. A5 played. That is not it. Are you really going to play Rook A5? Are you going to go Rook A5 here? Okay, apparently this is the idea. Notice how I played A3. Can you guys find anything in the position that suggests A3 is the correct move here? Spending a move to... I mean, it's not like I'm stopping the attack altogether, right? But I'm preventing the pawn from move another square forward. Why would I rather have this pawn formation instead of this pawn formation? Given that both of them kind of mean... here I got one extra move for my attack. So why don't I want the free move? The enemy bishop is light squared. Oh, that's so close. Holes on dark squares, that's kind of it, yeah. But I was looking for something a bit more specific. No need for allowing to weaken the king, but why does it weaken the king though? Keeps the king safer, yeah, kind of. But it's not precisely that. Yeah, I don't see anyone getting it. No dark squared bishop. Well done, Pandota. That is what I was looking for. So because we have a bishop that's on the light squares, as a general rule, I want to try have my pawns on the dark squares so that my bishop and the pawns complement each other. So this bishop is going to do a job to control the light squares, but that means I need someone to take responsibility for controlling the dark squares. So when given the option between whether I want to do this or whether I want to do this, if I end up here having all my pawns on the light squares while also having the light squared bishop, I feel like my dark squared control is not really working out very well. So I want to go a3 so that these pawns are doing a job keeping the dark squares, the ones I highlighted in particular, under control. And then in addition to these, I'm also going to have this bishop. And then because I'm controlling both the dark squares and the light squares, it makes for good control all together around my king. But a3 can be attacked later with b5, b4. Yes. But that's why it's not necessarily an obvious thing that at some point I was gonna have to, like, how can I put this? It's not without disadvantages to play the pawn to a3, because like you said, this pawn can be a hook for the black pawn advancing in the future. But because for the short term, I'm keeping both the dark squares and the light squares under control, I'm making the assessment that this is the more important thing in the short term, and in the long run, I'll try to find some way of preventing this by creating my own threats, in particular against the black king. But the enemy has a light bishop, light squared bishop. Yes, but you care more about what you have than what your opponent has. So it's more about what squares you control than necessarily what the opponent can do. So you want to have, when you only have one bishop remaining, as a general rule, you want to try placing your pawns on the opposite color of what that bishop is controlling. If the opportunity presents itself and if you have the timing for it, and there's so many exceptions to the rule, and the timing of it is always going to be difficult. But at like the higher arching, overarching principle, you look at your own bishop and then you decide your pawn placements based on that. Okay, Andrea has played g4, which is what we were expecting. This was obviously her plan with this h3 pawn move. She's trying to build up her pawns, going up against the black king. Black is very obviously going to play pawn to a4. That is pretty much the only idea he had with this advance. He's going to go pawn to a4, and if allowed, he will go pawn to a3. And if he's not allowed, he will move the rook up to have the rook influencing the game in from the side. And this way he managed to get the rook into the game, even though it was out of commission in the corner just a couple of moves ago. And what I'm excited about is whether or not Andrea will play the move a3 to utilize the principles we just talked about, which is that when you have a bishop on the light squares, you want to try and blockade pawns on the dark squares if possible. When will Alexandra resign? Yeah, it's kind of sad it's come to that, isn't it? Let's see. Alexandra played bishop to c5, so she's trying to break through this knight. And if the knight captures on c6, then Alexandra will have some opportunities attacking in towards the white king. Unfortunately, her opponent played queen to d3. Which number one gives extra protection to the knight in the middle, but number two opens up for the white bishop to take out the black knight on the next move. And if something like queen b6 here, we're just going to get a trade in the middle of the board, and black is just going to be super happy to make all of these trades. And at the end of the day, with the knight no longer contributing in the pressure towards the f2 pawn, the bishop and the queen together are not going to be enough to cause problems, and the queen is just going to step back, and Alexandra will still be down a pawn and a rook in trade for a bishop, and she'll have to resign, unfortunately. So yeah, actually resignation in Alexandra's game is going to come pretty soon. That's just a tough day at the office right there. Will Andrea catch up in rating to Alexandra? I wouldn't think so. So far, Andrea, I think, is... Well, she's not winning rating, but she's not losing either. So far, Andrea is about 0 in rating. And Alexandra is gaining some ratings since she beat an international master in the first round. So far this tournament... Alexandra is increasing her the distance between them so far, but early days still. Is Andrea going to be in time trouble? No, I don't think so. The clocks are 15 minutes delayed. And in the last 15 minutes, basically Andrea's opponent has been thinking a lot and Andrea has been playing pretty quick. And now Andrea's opponent just played f5, which computer not a massive fan of. But on the other hand, it does force Andrea to kind of shut down her intention of continuing forward with the pawns. I would assume Andrea plays pawn to g5 here, and then is just reasonably happy to have her pawns moving forward, and that there are fewer pawns giving protection to the black king. And she can then very easily continue with her other pawn just up the... That's one of the big advantages now for Andrea, that in these kind of positions, she could never go pawn to h4 because then the bishop can just capture the other white pawn. But because black goes for the kind of blockading move offering the trade of pawns here. When Andrea then just avoids the trade, it means that now this bishop scope is a lot less worthwhile, and it allows Andrea to have a very simple plan of just advancing the h pawn up the board next. And actually, no, this is just incredibly good for white, because this pawn is just going to make its way forward, and then if you just get this trade and open up for the rook, you're gonna be so easily just, as long as you get the queen now onto the diagonal to point down on the black king, that's just gonna be game over. In particular, because this pawn is also taking control of the f6 square, which is where we talked about black wanted to move their queen here to keep the king protected. So pawn to g5 is just a super good move for Andrea, and it makes her next couple of moves very easy also, with the advance of the h pawn. Can't black just play rook h8 and trade on the open line then? Yeah, but black doesn't decide when to open up, right? So say black went rook h8 already here, basically saying, I'm going to be, when you make this trade, I'm going to have my rook ready to fight back. But the problem then is that, okay, white decides I'm going to go for the knight trade here so that I get my queen pointing down on the king. And then after the king moves, now I'm going to be like, okay, if you didn't have your rook here, then I would make the trade and bring my rook in. But since you already put your rook in this terrible defensive position, you're preventing me from opening up the h-file, but you also misplaced your rook. And it's going to give some other good... Yeah, I guess you could do this. I'm not seeing an immediate way for white to do like a checkmate, but I am also watching the computer saying that white has an advantage comparable to 9 pawns, which means you basically cannot move anything without allowing some nastiness happening. So after queen to e5, your queen needs to protect here, your queen needs to protect here. Your pawn needs to protect here, your bishop needs to protect this diagonal. Like, basically black can barely move a single piece without getting checkmated. So you're not going to be able to hold this house of cards together in the long run. But yeah, would love to see a reasonably quick decision here from Andrea, because she doesn't have like a ton of time. And I feel like g5 followed by the next pawn pushing up is a reasonably Andrea-esque plan. I'm going to check in with Alexandra. Alexandra has made the trade, the bishop for the knight in the center. And after the recapture, what could she have played knight to b4? She probably wanted to play the knight here. The idea being that when the queen moves away somewhere, you can try to go knight to c2 and try and get your rook back. The problem is just that you don't get your rook back because the opposing rook can point down towards your queen. And you just made a horrible position even worse through that. So instead, Alexandra played... Oh, she played knight f6. But yeah. Now the rooks are going to come to the open file. I would be tempted to taking this pawn, but computer doesn't really like it. But something like this feels very straightforward to me, and we still have the same idea that we never fear the knight coming in for the fork, because we always have the counter with the rook pointing down against the black queen. Andrea's still thinking. I'm gonna have to take a tea bathroom break, or rather a bathroom break on account of all the tea I've been drinking. So give me a couple minutes and I'll be back. Okay, what has happened? Alexandra's opponent has played a lot of moves. He played like 5 moves while I was gone. Was I really gone for that long? So a rook has come here to point down here. The queen tried to attack this pawn. The rook came in here to a counterattack on b5. The pawn protected. The other rook came in to try and put pressure on the knight. And then Alexandra played her rook up to keep this under control. And her opponent played pawn to a3. I'm guessing maybe it wasn't these exact moves, but what I will say is that the position we have on the analysis board now is the same as is on the screen. So this happened, these moves happened, and I'm not sure if I got the moves in the right order. Andrea played knight to b5. How do we feel about that though? Like, why are we allowing this tension to still be there? I guess I can't really criticize her for not releasing the tension after being so firm in criticizing her for releasing the tension previously. The good news is that after initially not liking this knight to b5 move, the computer, after having thought for a little bit, decides that no, actually this was quite a clever idea. Black's only acceptable response is to capture the free pawn, which is always going to be a bit of a risky thing to do. You're never going to feel super confident about allowing your opponent to open up the H-file pointing down on the black king. That being said, it is what black has to do if they're going to survive this game, because black basically has a terrible position. They're under attack. Things are looking grim. And I ask you, would you rather have a grim position with equal material, or would you like to have a grim position with an extra pawn? And that's basically how I guide my defensive chess playing skills, is that if I'm going to suffer, I might as well suffer with an extra pawn. And that's probably how Andrea's opponent is going to think as well. Grim position against the gremlin. Yeah, it's become a habit for Andrea's opponents. She's been putting a lot of good pressure on her opposition the last 2 weeks. Is Alexandra just completely lost? Yeah. We're not giving that game a lot of attention. There's just no saving it. I hope she doesn't trade queens. Believe me, there's absolutely no reason to think Andrea would ever considering trading queens here. She wants to attack the black king. If she didn't want to do that, she obviously wasn't going to sacrifice a pawn on the king's side. So she's very much in an all-out attack kind of state of mind, which is her normal state of mind, but still. The guy sitting behind Alexandra is Suleimanov, who beat Magnus. Really? Is he wearing a watch? it's a cheap shot, but I couldn't. The one thing, the Suleimanov game, the only kind of good thing that came out of that game, in my opinion, is my decision to decide next time I'm playing against Magnus, I'm wearing a minimum of one watch. I didn't know that's all it took to beat Magnus. One watch per arm. But I also have ankles, Pepega. I also have ankles. There's some quick moves happening. B4 solidifies white's position. Seems fine. Alexandra plays king g7. She knows there's no hope. She's just hoping for a miracle. And to be fair, there was a miracle in one of Andrea's games from Prague. So she's just hoping for a similar thing. Is tomorrow 2 games as well? No, tomorrow is 1 game, but then there's another 2-game day on Monday. So it's a pretty tight schedule. But the final 3 rounds of the event are all 1 game per day. So that's nice. Did opponent go rook f6? Oh gosh, he did. That is not it. I already wanted Andrea to go g5 on the previous move. And now the guy is really asking for it. Now g5 is just even better. Attacking the rook has to go. Then the queen can come in on the diagonal, give a check. And because we played g5, we have the f6 square under control. So black is not able to move the queen in between to help out her king. And if the king moves back, then we capture the knight. What's good about capturing the knight? Well, I'll tell you. Once we take out the black knight, the knight is no longer controlling the c4 square, which means we'll be able to get our bishop here, and then we're attacking the rook and the king. And we'll bring another rook in. Yeah, this is GG's. Pawn to g5, and it's over. How's Andrea doing on... Andrea's not doing great on time. She just needs to make a decision here. I guess she could be tempted to go in queen c3, trying to point the queen in towards the black king. Ooh, but the knight to b4 is a bit sneaky. Because then the bishop attacks the knight, and the knight attacks this guy, which is trouble, because there's other stuff happening as well. So the only other sensible move than going with a pawn up is going with the queen here first. But frankly, you don't need to be coy about the way you execute your attack. Pawn up attacks the rook. The rook has to move. Queen up attacks the king. There's no way to block the check, so the king has to move. And then the trade opens up the c4 square. And like this attack just plays itself. So the only thing that could take you down, Andrea, is your time usage. Just play the most direct moves, make the biggest threats possible on your next 4 moves, and you win the game. As easy as that. Looks like it's a good day for the white pieces. Except Alexandra this morning. When is best to use your time? Oh my gosh, if that question was possible to answer, everyone would be good at chess. In general, you want to use your time in the critical positions where an inaccuracy has a bigger cost than elsewhere. Like typically when you only have like 1 or 2 good moves, or you're trying to formulate a plan, stuff like that. But the question you're asking goes to the very core of time management. And there's a lot of chess players struggling with their time management. Top players of the world, definitely included. Grishchuk is infamous for never having more than a minute left by move 25, 30. G5 on the board. That's good news. Let me go back to the current situation. But to be fair, like when he plays rook f6, he's really asking for it. Like this was already a good move on the previous one, but now it just becomes even better because it's also attacking the rook. And I think Andrea should win now without any trouble. Making this check with the queen is completely obvious. Making the trade of knight to enable her bishop to come in, also completely obvious. She's got this in the bag. In Alexandra's game, her opponent is not playing incredibly well. But the thing is that his position is so good, he doesn't even have to play well to win, which is kind of annoying. Alexandra is doing a nice maneuvering here with her knight. The idea is that the knight will attack the rook, and if the rook has to move back, then Alexandra will be able to regain a pawn. And, you know, 1 pawn here, 1 pawn there. In the end, it kind of adds up to whether her opponent can win the game or not. The only concern is that she can't actually take the white rook, because if she does, then white recaptures and gets a double attack on the queen and on the rook. So that's not great. But she found a good plan. Honestly, her opponent is spending a sensational amount of time, given that he does have like this incredibly winning position. He played pawn to g4, now knight to e6. She's trying to cause some problems for the white position. I must admit, I thought that this game was just, there's absolutely no reason to play on whatsoever. But the time usage of Alexandra's opponent, the fact that he's still spending a lot of time for every decision, every move, it's kind of showing that she was right to keep the game going. Here he goes queen to e3. Yeah, that's a good move. He realizes that he doesn't need to fare. The knight takes rook, unfortunately. Alexandra is going to have to go with the rook back to then try and capture. But the problem is that after g5, the knight is under attack. The knight has to move. And when the knight moves, the protection of the pawn in the center also disappears. And the queen can get in. And then, yeah, actually, I take this back. Alexandra's opponent has been spending a lot of time, but he did find a very good plan to make sure that he gets through and starts winning even more central pawns. So he spent a lot of time on it, but he came up with a good plan. And he is gonna win this game. In Andrea's game, her opponent has played rook to e6. Andrea did go with a check on the king, like we expected. The king has retreated. And now Andrea wants to have her bishop pointing in towards the black king. If she plays her bishop here to begin with, that bishop can be captured by the knight. So she would like to remove this knight. And as it happens, completely accidentally, there is a white knight ready to capture the black knight. And so that's what Andrea has done. And if rook takes, then we're just going to trade the rooks. And then the bishop comes in, check on the king. The king only has one square to go. But then the queen comes in for the checkmate, supported by the bishop, also supported by the pawn. So both the bishop, the pawn, the queen, all playing a role in this checkmate. And that's why black has to capture with a pawn instead. But if he captures with a pawn, then his rook gets caught on the same diagonal as his king. So I'm actually expecting Andrea's opponent to potentially resign here, because there's just no hope with both the white bishop and the white queen pointing in towards the black king's hideout. You're just never going to survive that onslaught. What did Alexandra do? She played queen b7. She actually is reinforcing her protection of the d5 square. Unfortunately, now queen to e5 attacks the rook, and if the rook retreats, then pawn to g5, and there's a pin, and the pawn's protected, and it's attacking here. So that's going to be it. Tomorrow is only one game. So for those of you already trying to plan your Sunday, don't worry, I got you covered. The games will start at 3 p.m. local time. That is 4 p.m. Central European. It is 11 a.m. Eastern United States, and it's 8 a.m. Pacific, which means essentially that it's at an acceptable hour of the day, as opposed to the nightmare morning we had today. No more 5 a.m. tomorrow. There's another 5 a.m. on Monday, but tomorrow is the rest day, the Sunday. And by rest day, I mean you can't rest, but you get to only play one game, as opposed to the nightmarish 2. Queen e5 is on the board for Alexandra's opponent, pointing in towards the rook. Nothing much to be done here. Both girls lost in the morning, Barton, unfortunately. Okay, Alexandra realizes that if she moves the rook, the pawn will come in. So instead, she chooses to capture the white rook, thinking that if white recaptures, then she'll be able to move her rook to the side and attack the queen so that she has time to get out of the queen's pressure in towards the king. Unfortunately, this also means that it's actually completely fine for white to capture the black rook. And if the knight moves up into an attacking situation, then the rook will do the same thing in towards the black queen and the black king. So, yeah. Alexandra is going to have to resign now. And Andrea's opponent is going to have to resign now as well. So they're going to finish at approximately the same time. Andrea is going to have 1 point more than Alexandra, but she also has faced significantly lower rated opposition. Alexandra still has faced an average of 2,300 in her games, whereas Andrea has faced an average of, I want to say, 1750, something like that. But you can only win the games that you're playing. So Andrea has done well in the fights she's had, and we're only 3 games into the tournament, so there's still another 6 games to try and become the best sister. Could they play each other tomorrow? No. No, they could not. How are the opponents chosen? Normally, you play someone with equal amount of points as you. The system in Iceland is a bit trickier, but essentially 1 point between the girls is too much of a difference for them to play each other. Alexandra plays her knight back to e6. By doing this, she takes control of the c7 square, avoiding the infiltration from black's rook. However, the white queen will now just return to where it came from, once again pointing in towards the black king and threatening to move ahead with the pawn to attack the knight, and the knight cannot move because then you put your king in check. Alexandra will have to go pawn to g5 to prevent the white pawn's advance, and then white will sacrifice a pawn on the side so that you do get the pawn up in the end, and that's going to be the end of it. Oh, Alexandra already played g5, actually. Called it. I swear I didn't check the video feed. h4 on the board. And that is going to be the end of it. King up. Somehow Alexandra is managing to avoid to lose her knight. But there are going to be a lot of different other... No, actually she's not even avoiding that. h5 check, king moves back. h6 check, king moves up. The king needs to keep close to the knight, but here the queen comes in, check, and then you have to leave the protection of the knight, allowing white to win the game. Alexandra's opponent instead plays queen f5 check, and when the king goes back, I guess he just captures on g5. But there, Alexandra actually managed to avoid losing her her knight, but the problem is she's losing everything else everywhere. Andrea's opponent takes with a pawn. we're expecting Andrea to immediately get the bishop up. Alexandra resigns her game. A tough defeat. Really just one bad move from Alexandra. She got under pressure from the opening, I will admit that. But other than the unpleasantness she felt from the opening, it was really just one bad move, and suddenly everything was completely hopeless. And she did play a hammer recommended move at some point, which kind of turned out really poorly, because that actually just gave White's attack a possibility to latch itself onto and sacrifice a bishop. All in all, I think a very well executed game by today's opponent, Karamseti. And Alexandra gets 2 losses on the day, and that is going to be tough to recover from mentally. But the good news is that at least tomorrow you'll face a somewhat easier opponent, and then the question becomes whether you manage to strike back from the disappointing double round, or whether your mental state is a bit too hung up on the bad day previous. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Does Andrea need extra time? No, I think she's fine. She moved her bishop up. She's pointing down towards the black king. Her opponent plays knight to b4, which I guess under the circumstances is an okay choice, because now if bishop takes rook, at least you have some ideas trying to create trouble for the white king. In fact, computer is saying that bishop takes rook is actually a significant mistake, making this much, much more difficult. Instead, the move the computer wants... Oh, gosh. This thing is living its own life. Oh, my... Let me just... Okay. Let's go here. So we were here, and I said, you should not capture the rook. In fact, the move recommended by the computer... Oh my... Don't stop. The board is moving on its own. I'm not saying I believe in spirits and ghosts and whatnot, but that was freaky. Rook takes d6 was recommended by the computer, and the good news is it's also what Andrea played. Really good move from Andrea. That is a knockout blow. The black rook cannot capture because of the bishop's pressure down towards the black king. And if rook to c8 trying to point down against, well, pretty much all the white pieces who have made camp on the c file, then Andrea can just capture on e6, check on the king, and if the bishop recaptures, suddenly the white rook is able to take out the black queen, and with it win the game. Andrea's opponent instead plays queen to e7, and now once again Andrea can capture the black rook. It's a perfectly good move, but it's even better to bring in another piece into the attack, give extra protection to the rook. Now you're also threatening the bishop, and you're just bringing all the pieces to the party, and the black king is completely overwhelmed by what's going on. And in fact, the rook coming in from the corner is what Andrea did, and she's got this completely under control. Andrea played this one kind of perfect. I mean, I don't like the trade she made, though, in the center. But she played it well. You guys want to see her opponent? You're so demanding. You want to see his pain. Wow. That's pretty harsh. When are the next pairings announced? So usually the pairings are announced 6 hours after the start of the round. So I would expect the pairings to be ready at 10 p.m. local time, which is 11 p.m. Oslo time. What will happen if he goes b4 takes a2? Well, you can try to get the attack against both the queen and the bishop and the king, but this is why it's been so clever of Andrea. Wow, I need a break now. Andrea has been very clever not to capture this rook too soon because she knows the rook can never really go anywhere as the bishop holds the diagonal towards the black king, but the bishop also holds the diagonal backwards, making sure that the knight fork is not possible. So she's just keeping everything under control. And look at this move, bishop to b5. So he's trying to be sneaky. He's trying, just like you talked about, right? That we want to try and get this bishop out of the game so that the knight can come in for the fork, and that would actually just win the game instantly for black. So we're obviously very aware of this bishop's defensive duties as well as its contributions in the attack. And I guess for Andrea, she's just going to take the rook now. You don't need to make it complicated. Just take the rook. And then you allow this fork, but you manage to win the queen anyway. And it turns out, when all is said and done, white just has an extra rook in this circumstance. And that's going to cause a resignation. There is a better way. I mean, but why would you need a better way if this way is going to cause your opponent to resign? Yeah, no worries. I wasn't gonna call you, Alexandra. We're just gonna watch the end of Andrea's game. But she's gonna be done very, very soon. So if you want to talk with her, it's probably gonna happen in 5 minutes. Okay, Andrea plays the good move. You happy now, chat? No, she didn't want to just be up a rook. No, she wanted to win everything. Oh, no, you can't go bishop takes rook. Oh, extra rook is not good enough. Oh, no, it's checkmate in 10 moves. Oh, hammer, checkmate. No, don't do like that, hammer. You missed a checkmate, dude. Okay. The goal of the game is just winning. You don't get points for style. But yeah, Andrea did play the checkmate in 10 moves. So good for her, I guess. Hammer losing it after too much commentary in a day? Yeah. Fair enough. Tomorrow's games start at 3 p.m. local time, 4 p.m. Central Europe, 11 a.m. New York Eastern, and 8 a.m. Pacific. You go, rook takes e6, or Ivanchuk will go, okay, inaccurate. Fair enough. Andrea doesn't want to get the wrath of Ivanchuk going. What about Hawaiian time? I mean, if I'm going to include Hawaiian time, I might as well include, mainline China, which at least has more people. I don't even know Hawaiian time. Is it like 2 hours from Pacific? 3 hours? Only Hawaiians know. That's probably the correct answer, yes. Who cares about Hawaiian time other than Hawaiians? We'll leave them to it. Bishop takes bishop, and now queen takes bishop, and you keep the... Wow. Andrea finding all the right moves, huh? Are you proud of her, chat? She played your silly checkmate in 10 moves. She could have just ended the game instantly by getting an endgame with an extra rook, after which her opponent would have just resigned. But no, she had to do it the complicated way so that her opponent is still thinking about the calculations just in case there's something someone is missing. Whereas if she had played the obvious stuff, he would have already resigned. I'm all about efficiency, chat. And the quickest checkmate isn't necessarily the most efficient thing. When you just clarify to a rook up position, your opponents do tend to resign. Blasphemy. If we have a checkmate in 10 moves, you must execute the checkmate in 10 moves. Okay, now there's a checkmate in 3 moves. Rook takes g6. Double check. But in order to figure this out, Andrea's gonna have to spend more time thinking about it. Whereas if she had taken with the bishop earlier, then she wouldn't have had to think about anything for the rest of the game. I'm pretty sure I'm right about this, chat. You may give her style points, but she definitely did make it more difficult for herself. She's capable of winning with an extra rook. Hammer just wants to go. Don't reveal my secrets. She is a streamer after all. Fair point, Druple. She's milking the content. I guess I can respect that. She's playing pretty well. I'll give you that. She's playing pretty well. She played well in Prague as well. I mentioned it. I think I mentioned it yesterday, but Andrea has been really impressing me. I genuinely didn't think she was this good. I think it's very likely she'll make 1900 during this tournament. Who knows? Maybe even beyond that. You didn't think she would beat 1600? That's not what I said, though. It's not just about beating your opponents. It is also about how you do it. And whether you do it with confidence and style and accuracy. And also, to be fair, my assessment of Andrea has also been quite colored by the fact that she was completely annihilating one 1900 after another in Prague. Okay, he resigns the game. GG's. No points for style. Well, there's no points in the tournament for style. But I guess the audience does give some kind of style points. You know, I'm all about the result. I'm a grumpy old grandmaster. I went beyond the point where I get enjoyment from my games, and now I just want to win. And Andrea hasn't gotten beyond that point yet. She wants to win in style. And she did. Andrea has really messy handwriting. Oh my god, really? Did you see her handwriting? Did she put the form too close to the screen? Are we revealing family secrets right now? I will let you know that my handwriting for a boy is like 10 out of 10. On the girl scale, it's like 6 out of 10. That's actually one of the most confusing things in the world. What happened in the world to make girls' handwriting so much better than boys? Like, we're both humans, right? How is the average boy handwriting so much worse? But anyway, I take pride in mine. The wave, very happy wave, and then bye-bye. Andrea is gonna find her way out of the playing venue. She's gonna get on her cell phone and she's gonna call us to tell us all about this game and how she completely annihilated Mr. Philip Clare of England. And yeah, there's not really much more to say about it. It was a one-way bulldozing. Philip never really stood a chance. And Andrea tomorrow gonna face I think a significantly higher rated opponent. I think tomorrow Andrea is gonna get like a 2050, maybe even better. But she is gonna have the black pieces. What's been interesting to see during the Prague tournament and here in Reykjavik is that Andrea with the white pieces is just demolishing people. But now that I think about it, she did win with black in the first round here in Reykjavik, but her black score has been abysmal in general. So tomorrow is going to be a big day for her to try and showcase that she's improving her black games. Can you play out the remaining moves and show us the mate? Yeah. So here, because both the queen and the rook is threatening the king, you can't take the rook because then the queen is attacking. And you can't take the queen because then the rook is attacking. So in the general rule is that whenever you execute a double check, normally there's 3 ways to cover a check. You can either capture the piece that's checking, you can cover, you can block the check, or you can move the king. But when you're in double check, you can never block and you can never capture the piece that's giving the check, because you're always getting checked from 2 different directions, and you're always, because otherwise it's not possible to have a double check. And you also cannot block, no, sorry, and you also cannot capture because you can't capture 2 pieces at once. So when you're in a double check, your only choice is to move the king. If the king moves to the left, the queen comes in for the checkmate. And if the king goes into the corner, the queen comes in, check. The only way to stop the check is by blocking with the queen, but no matter how you block, the queen will come in for the checkmate thereafter. So that's how the game could have ended if not for the immediate resignation. Pilgrimage, if you want to start playing chess, I recommend you start out after you're reasonably comfortable on how the pieces move. You should start learning how to give a checkmate with a queen against a king. And then you need to learn how to do a checkmate with a rook against a king. And then you start doing puzzles. And then you start also playing some practice games. That's going to be your best road to improvement from completely starting out. Ring the chessers. I mean, I'm waiting for her, right? Why? If I message Andrea now, do you think that's gonna make her get ready faster? She won her game. Obviously, she's gonna want to talk to stream, but she'll be ready when she's ready. Oh my god, I had caps lock on. Benzea in chat, learn the Jabava London. Wow, are you talking to me? Or are you saying that Alexandra should do the Jabava London? I don't want this to spread though. Oh, to the guy who wants to learn chess. No, don't learn the Jabava London. No, that's the problem with chess. Like, different coaches have very different philosophies and opinions on how you should, what you should do to improve. I was actually talking to a friend of mine about this, and she was on like she was starting out as an adult improver, and she felt like a lot of people were kind of just picking and choosing the method that they liked. They were choosing the coach they wanted to listen to based on their already preconception on how they wanted to.
Hello.
Hold on a little bit. I'm just gonna get you on. Okay.
Hello.
Your camera kind of went out.
Where'd it go? Hang on, it broke. It's broken. Oh. Okay. Holy schmoly, it's
Where's
cold
your
out
gloves?
here. Well, I can't use them because then I can't tap the screen. I must sacrifice my fingers for the sake of smooth technology.
Okay, just checking.
My games, oh my god, it's so windy! It's blowing me away. My games were low-key a mess today. I didn't. My first game, I had prepped exactly for what he played, but I was so sleepy, and this 9 a.m. round ruined all of us. That in the morning, I woke up too late to do my prep, and I looked at it last night, and by the morning, I had forgotten it, and I had the perfect line to play against his rookie one, and I knew I was supposed to go E4 earlier, but I forgot because I was a sleepy girl. And then this game, I played absolutely no theory, and I definitely did not play that opening very well because I feel like I traded everything thinking I had tactics when I should have just kept the pressure. But we still won. But I'm not proud of this win very much.
Oh, really? It was pretty good, no? I mean, other than taking on D6, it was great.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I took on D6 too soon because I thought I had knight G5 right away. But then I realized they had bishop G4, and then I would go into the end game up a pawn, but with doubled pawns, and I didn't like. Oh my God, it's so windy! Wow, look at the mountains. Wait, and then I'd go into the end game up pawn, double pawns. It wasn't that good, so I should have kept the pressure. But my sleepy brain. But look at the mountains, chat. Wow, it looks like that water straight from the glaciers. Anyways, I guess, was the opening okay? Was I supposed to take on E5?
The computer thought taking on E5 was bad after taking on G7. So basically, the computer thought taking on E5 is good, but that you should do it without trading the bishops, because if you don't trade the bishops, then after pawn takes E5, you can go H4, and he doesn't have the ability to go H5 because your bishop is blocking.
Yeah. That was my prep that I forgot. I realized I was, for some reason, because I didn't have that many lines on E5 because it's not that good. Wow, the mountains are so beautiful. And I realized that after I traded everything, I was just like trading everything, and I was so scared I was going to go into like a draw in game. But yeah, he made a couple blunders. But I need to be more sharp tomorrow, but gonna catch up on sleep. No more excuses for tomorrow because all of my prep I had in hand, and then I just forgot about it.
But I mean, a double round it's always going to be tricky, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, the 9 a.m. was, me and Dina went to bed at like 3 a.m. and I think Alex slept like 4 hours. And I think Anna Kremling fell asleep at her game until she had 1 minute on the clock and was about to flag.
Are you kidding me?
So us streamers don't do very well. No, that's what Jules told me. And I saw the clock. People saw it on stream. But Jules told me that she fell asleep and almost flagged.
Oh,
So it could be worse.
Well, you know there's another morning round, right?
Yeah, myself for that one. I don't know if I could do another 9 a.m., but I will try. But from the first game as well, actually, to be honest, like I just no, okay, otherwise than the bad opening and getting into bad position, which I felt after E6 from game 1 was okay. Do you have any words of wisdom from game 1 today?
No, I mean, you just made a blunder, right? I mean, I felt like you played a bit too quickly because your
Yeah,
opponent was low on time and you wanted to try and
I did.
punish him.
Yeah, I was trying to cheese him. I
Yeah,
thought I could cheese him, but
didn't
I
really
got
work out,
cheesed
did it?
instead.
Yeah. That's the
Yeah,
thing, the
I just
clock doesn't
I
matter
want
as much as you think it does. Because in 30 seconds, almost
I
everyone
know.
is capable of finding a good move.
I would just really like to flag somebody for once. I'm always the one getting flagged, and I thought, okay, this is the game. This is my time to shine. I'm about to flag a 2000. So it was more just a personal goal.
Yeah,
But yeah,
a bit much wanting compared to
can't see
playing the
chat.
board.
Did they? Well, honestly, yeah. Well, maybe we'll get one one flag in the tournament, but only if I begin remembering my prep. How did
Do
Alex's
you
game
think
go?
your
I want to
prep
ask her
is
to dinner, but
Do you think your prep is kind of like without good prep you cannot win games? Do you think your preps are deciding your
no,
games?
because well, like in the first game, I realized really quickly that I had forgotten the move order and I messed up. But I still felt like I had a decent position, which I definitely did until I literally played knight takes in like 3 seconds because I didn't calculate rook takes and I saw the rest and thought it was good. So, but definitely what happens is like in the first game, I realized what I had done, that I forgot my prep, and then I was so disappointed in myself that like I couldn't get it out of my head. But then I felt like even apparently he played the best, and apparently like he had prepared everything.
We lost you.
Pretty so even
We,
knowing
we
that I had
lost you for the last like
and
5
knowing
seconds.
okay, so my first round opponent told me that he had prepped that line on the computer. That e pawn e5. I don't know about e6. But to be honest, even when I got to that position, even though I was like upset at myself for forgetting my prep, I still thought I had a good position. But I didn't.
You were fine.
Computer
Your
didn't like
games
my
are not
position,
really
as
being
usual.
decided by the opening, which is why I'm kind of poking and asking you some questions about this, because it's actually a bad thing for you to be prepared if the result is that you feel bad about forgetting your prep more than you feel kind of
Yeah.
because then the preparation is kind of working against its intention. The point of preparing for our games is to feel confident. But if you feel repeatedly that, oh, I forgot my prep, now I'm feeling bad, when the actual fact of the matter is that basically none of your games are being decided in the opening with your preparation. You can get a good position, sure, but ultimately it's going to be good moves that convert that position into a win.
Yeah. Well, so then I'm kind of lacking the good moves to convert.
Are you
Maybe
though?
a little.
Because like this game was excellent against Vulcan. You absolutely destroyed him. You made a big blunder in time scramble this morning, but like that was for different reasons. It didn't have to do with the prep, and it didn't have to do with bad moves or good moves. It had to do with you being too eager, wanting to beat someone on time instead of focusing on the position at hand.
Okay, that's good to know because in my head, like, I can't really tell the quality that my chess has been. Also, I was very, very sleeping, so I feel like I was definitely missing some things.
Yeah, but
that's
were you
good to know.
sleepy because you spent a lot of time preparing and then it turned out you actually got negative emotions from that preparation because you forgot the details?
I prepped at like 11 p.m. and then I fell asleep at like 3 a.m. So I was not super sleepy because of that. I was uploading to our shared Snapchat story until 2 a.m. and then I couldn't fall asleep. So no more phone before bed. That was my mistake.
Yeah.
All right. Well, food is closing at 8. I'm gonna grab some dinner. Chat, I can't see you guys because maybe I can. I only have one phone. But I hope to finally cheese a 2000 tomorrow. I would like to stop getting paired against the 1600s and start beating some 2000s. But first,
I think you're getting at least a 2050 tomorrow. And you might get the white pieces since you had double black.
Okay, good. I'll take it. I'm gonna go try to cheer up Alex. I'll see if she lets me in. But thank you, Hammer, for the commentary today and the notes. I'm gonna analyze my games and also just look at those positions. But I do hear you, and I do think that is something I should work on. So thank you for the feedback. And chat, we'll be back tomorrow.
Bye.
Okay, bye guys. Bye Hammer. Bye chat. Bye bye. I'm gonna go say bye in the chat so I can read you guys. Bye bye. See you tomorrow.
Okay, we're gonna send the raid to Dina. Last time we did this, I said she was still playing, but she was actually doing her post-game interview. So if someone can give me the spill the beans on what's going on with Dina right now. Dina's still playing. And Dina's playing a good player from Iceland, a 2400-ish kind of guy. So good luck to Dina. We'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow is not going to be a morning round. It's going to be at 3 p.m. Icelandic time. That's 6 p.m. Central. Oh my God, it's not. It's 3 p.m. Icelandic time, 4 p.m. Central Europe, 11 a.m. US Eastern, and 8 a.m. Pacific. The schedule is somewhere on the channel. You'll figure it out if you search for it. But that's when I'm going to be back with another game. The girls, well, especially Alexandra, needing to avenge today. But she's probably getting the white pieces, which is often a good start. I'll see you then. Good night, everyone.